Hello everyone, it's Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS video. I hope all of you are staying healthy, I hope all of you are staying safe. I apologize that I have not uploaded a video in about a week now. I've just been kind of down about things, as I'm sure a lot of people are with the whole circumstances of the world, but I promise I will try to be more consistent going forward, as the current Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, is on indefinite hiatus. But a couple of days ago, over this past weekend, actually on Mother's Day, I believe, we got some really cool news. This is stuff that probably interests me the most out of any aspect when it comes to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animes. As much as I love my Easter eggs and my cameos and my references, I love scrapped storylines and behind-the-scenes info more than anything else. And we got the first little insight onto what Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS was originally supposedly planning to do, from a former staff blog post. Now, there's been a lot of mistranslations that were circulating the internet, the biggest one being that this blog post confirmed that Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS was canceled. The person who made that translation and posted that translation, I believe, has retracted the statement. I even reached out to DMC directly, who's an amazing guy. He's been a translator, a reliable translator in this community for a very long time, and I asked him if there was anything regarding a cancellation in the post, and DMC said no, there was nothing about a cancellation, and there was also nothing about Yusaku being an artificial intelligence being or merging with or becoming an AI, which was another rumor that was coming from this post. Really, there was only one very noteworthy thing from this post, which was the original storyline, and that's what we are going to be discussing. Now, we do not know the exact staffer that did make this post. We believe it might be the same prop designer that has worked on the show since Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, but that's mere speculation. We have it on good authority that this is someone who did work in Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS. It's just someone who is obviously not going to come out with their identity, because it's obviously a risky thing to do, especially if you're talking about things that were planned behind the scenes. But this is essentially the part of the post that means everything that we are going to be talking about very in depth in this video. And here it is. DMC did this translation. I'm glad the bad ending we were told about during the first meeting, where humanity is destroyed, did not happen, but I think it would have been more fun if Naoki and the Duel Club members showed up more. So basically, in this post, a former staffer who worked on Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS confirmed that the original plot of Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS was going to see humanity being destroyed. And that was essentially going to be the ending of the show, because he says in his post this was going to be a bad ending. Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS was going to have an ending that probably, this is my speculation, saw Yusaku Fujiki killed off permanently, that probably saw all the humans we grew to love, Aoi's Aizen, Go Onizuka, Revolver, Soulburner, all be killed off. I mean, if humanity is getting destroyed, that's probably, and it's going to have a bad ending, that's probably what would have happened, which it would have been insane to me if Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS, one of the safest shows, again, you're coming off of Arc 5, which was a show that took a lot of risks in its writing, and I think because of the backlash from Arc 5, from a lot of the fandoms, including Nico fandom over in Japan, I think they wanted to play it a bit safe when it came to VRAINS, and I think that was very apparent during the show. I mean, I still liked Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS a lot, but I have no problem stating that the show did not take many risks. And how insane would it have been if one of the safest shows in the last like 5 to 10 episodes just saw I actually succeed with his plans, and that vision that we see in episode 120, as and spoilers, obviously, as is dying in Yusaku's arms, as is dying in Playmaker's arms after the final duel. That vision that we see, where says in every simulation, it ended up the same. As long as I'm alive, humanity gets destroyed. And there was a scene where tanks, literal military tanks, fired and shot Yusaku in cold blood. And I had to witness that. I mean, that, for a Yu-Gi-Oh!, that is pretty intense. And that very well, I have a feeling that that was originally how the show was legitimately going to end, according to this staffer. When this was being discussed in the very beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS production, I believe that the plan, the scene that we saw in 120, could have actually been the reality of it, where Ai maybe realizes the error of his ways, the error of his existence, and he sees Yusaku get shot, and shortly afterwards, the show might have ended. I mean, according to the staffer, the initial plan was for this show to have a bad ending, which, again, for a shonen to end on that kind of note where your main characters get killed, where it speaks to, and that would speak to the very common trope, right, of artificial intelligence ultimately ending the human race, which I know we've seen in a lot of movies, we've seen in a lot of sci-fi genres, and we've seen ultimately in a lot of theories. We've seen a lot of people theorize that the way humanity is going to end is going to be because of artificial intelligence, and VRAINS kind of played to that a little bit, but they didn't play to it to the extremity that they could have chosen to play to it, which would have been the initial plan of ending the world and essentially wrapping up Studio Gallup's run with Yu-Gi-Oh! In a very, very grim and symbolic way. And I don't really know what to think. I don't know if I would have liked this. I said the whole time while Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS was going on, it was the most, I would say it was the most serious show of any Yu-Gi-Oh! And maybe that is also a bit of a knock on it. I think it needed more slice of life moments, more lower stake duels. I mean, almost every duel in Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS was life or death, or the Ignis was on the line. I was on the line, Flame was on the line, or if you lose, you die, and you get turned to data. At least 85, off the top of my head, at least 85% of the duels were life or death with these really, really high stakes. And I didn't mind that, but I thought VRAINS needed to pull it back just a little bit to really let these characters blossom in maybe a more real-life role, so that when they are dueling with these high stakes, we can kind of relate to them a little more. I thought there should have been more scenes of Yusaku and Aoi and Homura going to school and just kind of hanging out, and maybe dueling in the real world, which unfortunately we didn't get to see until I versus Pandor, ironically enough, the two robot characters dueling in the real world. But it needed a little more of that, and I think it's really interesting that this staffer kind of realizes that that was one element that was lacking in Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS, I would say, because he even says, I think it would have been more fun if Naoki and the Duel Club members showed up more. And again, I don't know if he's memeing or joking around, but honestly, I don't think he is. I think he's basically saying that VRAINS needed not necessarily more comedic moments, but needed a little bit more world building in the real world. I thought the world building was fine. I didn't think it was an issue, but when it came to the real world and the more parts of the show that you can relate to these characters, because unfortunately virtual reality to that extreme of being able to go into another realm is not really accessible to 99% of the population. And so the way you can really relate to these characters very easily is to see how they are in the real world, to get scenes of them in school, to get scenes of them hanging out in the Duel Club and talking strategy and deck building. Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't do that too often, but it's almost like this staffer realized that that was something that could have helped the show. And he didn't want to go down the route where humanity is destroyed. And I find that to be very interesting as well, because that was clearly the same sentiment that a lot of staffers must have shown while discussing this ending. Right, this ending was proposed like, hey, we're going to work on VRAINS, here's the characters, here's how we want it to end, because this staffer also says that I, being the villain, being the main bad guy, was planned from the beginning. So that was another thing that he confirmed, even though there were hints throughout the whole series. I think of the end of the Faust duel, where he had that reaction to Faust saying that he was going to bring the end of the world. And so maybe even at that point in the show, they were still riding with the idea that the world was going to end, that humanity was going to be destroyed and ultimately lose. So I was going to be the villain the entire time, but as all of this is being proposed, this anonymous staffer and probably a lot more members at Studio Gallup on the team of VRAINS decided that this would not be the best route to go. Whether they thought it was a little too intense for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, which it very well could be. I know a lot of people will say, well, 5Ds kind of did that, but 5Ds was an alternate future that ended up not happening due to Yusei defeating Zone. Well, Zexal did that, yeah, but everything was peachy dandy at the end of Zexal. Zexal revived everyone. Zexal saved Baryon World. Zexal saved Astro World. Zexal saved Earth. The only one who really, you know, had to eat a bullet was Don Thousand, and he was the main villain. So Zexal kind of went that route, but they revived everything. Based on this, I don't think that revival would have happened in the show. So this would have been another level for the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, especially at the end of a show, after Arc 5's very happy ending and Zexal's happy ending, and even 5D's optimistic ending. You know, Yu-Gi-Oh has always ended on an optimistic, happier feel. This would have been a very pessimistic, wow, are we all bound to this fate as a human being in the real world watching this show feel, and they just felt like it wasn't maybe appropriate to convey that message in this sort of setting, in the Yu-Gi-Oh anime setting. And so I found that to be very interesting in this, that a lot of people working on the show did not like that idea and thought that idea was probably going to be a little too intense. When I hear stuff like this, guys, I really just want them to announce they're going to do this ending in like a 30-episode special that will start where Season 3 started, but it will just be a different canon. It won't be the true canon, or it'll be an alternate universe with the characters we all know and enjoyed for the first 100 episodes. I think that would be so cool. I don't think that if they had more time, they would have went down this route. This was a route that they probably scrapped way before they knew the show was only going to have 120 episodes, so I don't think they were short on time and didn't execute this way. But I do think that that glimpse of what we saw in episode 120 very well could have been the reality of what this show was going to be early on in production. There were a few other interesting notes. Robopi being a boy surprised this staffer. DMC said that the staffer was surprised because the staffer thought that Robopi was a girl the entire time, not that Robopi became a human. I've seen some people say that the staffer was surprised Robopi became a human at the end. DMC said that's not really what he meant by surprised, and again, I do trust DMC's word on all of this. He is a great translator. And then another aspect that was interesting, I wanted to ask, was there any resentment or negativity in this post? Because if you worked for Studio Gallop and Yu-Gi-Oh since GX, are you going to have any negativity or hostility or resentment that the show is now with Studio Bridge? It's with a different studio. The tone is much different, but there was no negativity whatsoever. I believe it ended with this staffer saying, I hope the Yu-Gi-Oh anime goes on forever. So that's nice that even though this is someone who was very loyal to Gallop and very loyal to Yu-Gi-Oh, he holds no resentment towards the franchise at all for going down a different path and for ultimately leaving Studio Gallop, where they had a 2-decade run with. So really interesting stuff. And again, when I hear things like this, it just makes me want to know more, right? Like, we don't know anything about Soltech's plans, even though I'm very ignorant on that. You cannot convince me that Soltech didn't have any big plans in Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS, especially early on. It makes me realize that there's probably so many situations and so many scrapped plot lines from Arc 5, from Zexal, from 5Ds, all the way to VRAINS that we will probably never know about. So this is one of the coolest things when a staffer comes out. It has to be anonymous, of course, but a staffer comes out and just reveals information like this. And we kind of got that with Arc 5 with Meiko Abe and her anger towards the entire team working on Arc 5. We got kind of an insight onto how production was backed up through her tweets, which have now been deleted. And now we get some insight on what VRAINS was potentially going to be, although a lot of staffers, including this one, felt it was probably not the best idea, and thus they went down a different route. But let me know, would you guys have wanted to see a Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS anime that ended with Yusaku Fujiki potentially dying, with humanity becoming extinct? Probably the only Yu-Gi-Oh! That you could easily say without any sort of doubt and hesitation that ended on a very, very somber and sad and dark tone. Or are you content with the ending we got and you're preferring the ending that we got to an ending that would have seen essentially everyone get wiped out and become extinct? I'm so excited to talk to you guys about this down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and a special thank you to my Platinum tier patrons Jorge Carrillo, Horace Maye, Goosey Q, Smith620, Blue Maiden 28, Panther J, Vincent Van Der Veen, Nero, Jarrett Buller, and Aura Dragon. And to my Diamond tier patrons, Jesse Wood, Latrell Smith, and Pegasus Seiya, and to my Egyptian God tier patron, Syn Cloud. Thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon and who is a YouTube channel member. You guys help me out immensely. I am super excited to talk to all of you about this down below. I will talk to you down below. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an amazing day.